Hey y'all, welcome to the Cookie Chat. It's Melissa with Missy P Sweets here. I'm on my own today. Chelsea's not here because it's tutorial day and I am going to show you guys how to watercolor. Now you guys voted over on our Instagram stories just a few days ago, and so we will be turning this into this inspiration that you guys chose, and it'll look something like this. Let's see, can you see? There we go. The lighting's kind of crazy. So we're gonna do this. So I wanna go over a few things with you guys before we jump into it. Just some tools and things to know when you are watercoloring. Let's start out with icing. There are different schools of thought on this. I use a regular royal icing for my watercolor. If you are part of my Patreon, I do provide that to all of my Patreons no matter what the subscription level is. So I will have a link to my Patreon in the notes here. And I do also do a lot of watercolor tutorials in there as well. So you are welcome to use my royal icing recipe, or another common one to use with watercolor is a blend of a glaze and a traditional royal icing. And Alyssa of GH Bakes, I'll include the link to her ordering form for her recipe, but I know that it's widely used for painting on cookies. So those are two things for royal icing. Now, we're talking about watercoloring on a cookie, which with watercoloring, you say, well, do you use water? That is absolutely a method that people use. I have actually taken a class by Andy at Crookey Cookies, and I will link the link to her class in the notes below. But I did a cocktail, like a summer cocktail painting class from her, and she uses water for hers. And what you find with water is that it doesn't dry as quickly, and so you have more movement with it. However, the reason that I kind of steer away from it is sometimes it can pit a little easier. And if that just means that it softens your icing. I mean, anytime you're putting a liquid on an icing, then it's going to soften it somewhat. So if you're having trouble, if you've tried it before with water and you're finding that it's pitting, then I suggest you try Everclear. Now, if you don't know this, if you're not used to decorating cookies, Everclear is so common in our industry and in cake decorating. The reason that people use Everclear, it dries almost immediately. Alcohol is not left on your cookie. You can't taste it or anything, but it dries so quickly that there's less likelihood that it's going to pit your cookie. Now, that being said, it's just a different way of doing the watercolor. So that's what I'm gonna teach you. And so because it dries quickly, I work in a lot of layers with it. I start out very soft and then work our way up. When working with Everclear, I highly suggest you use a little teardrop bottle. Again, I will link this in the notes. It just helps you control. Believe me, I tried working with these and it gets all over your stuff. The other thing are just little paint palettes. So I just get these from Dollar Tree, super cheap. Next, let's talk paintbrushes. So I use a variety of paintbrushes depending on what I'm going for. A ton of them, like these guys, I just get from Michael's. These are more to cover large areas, more space. You're gonna use more liquid with those. Then when you get into finer details, this is one brand that I like to use. These are actually made for fingernail art. These again are linked down below. And then my other ones are these. These are actually on sale right now at Amazon, depending on when you're watching it. I love these. These were recommended by Andy when I took her class. And again, these are linked down below. So those are 3 different kinds of paintbrushes that we'll be using. There's nothing too expensive with watercolor. It's really versatile. Last thing before we get started is, do you paint with gel color or do you paint with powders? Lucky for you, I use both. So I will be showing you both. As far as gel colors that I use AmeriColor gel. Today we're gonna be using avocado, electric green. We're gonna use some ivory, some gold, some olive, some dusty rose. It's one of my favorite AmeriColor gels. So those are the colors that we'll be using. And then also we will be using the Sugar Art dusts. So I will be using Sweetheart, Rose Leaf, and Fern. So those are dusts. If you don't have all these, it's okay. It's okay. This is just to show you guys, for you to get the feel of how to watercolor. So just use what you have. You should use a dry cookie for this. Once you get more comfortable with watercoloring and know like how it moves and how your icing works with it, I don't always wait for my cookies to dry completely. But for today's purposes, if you are going to be attempting to paint our beautiful cookie, go ahead and work with a dry one. That'll just be easier for you. All right, well guys, start dropping questions down below of anything I didn't answer immediately, and let's get to it. Okay, I am not a traditional trained painter in any way. This is something that I have figured out over my course of learning to decorate cookies and just the aesthetic that I wanted to put into my art, which is cookies. That means that I use a combination of projector and then freehand work when I am painting. What I like to use the projector for is to help me position and get a frame of reference on the cookie. And then that's when I go back and add all the dimension and shading and things like that. So I'm gonna put our inspiration picture right up here for a minute, and I want us to just kind of evaluate the colors here. What I'm seeing is these lighter colors. There is a little bit of like a yellowness in around here, and then it starts to build into more of that pink. So I'm going to start with outlining and kind of getting us a frame of reference on these larger flowers. And what I'm going to start with is my ivory, because I see right here in these lighter petals out to the sides that there's just a little bit of yellowy undertones. Now, ivory is one of my favorite colors to use anytime that I'm working up on say a lighter peachy pink, or especially with animals. If you're looking for a brown, a lot of browns can turn green or muddy very easily. And I do talk about this on some of my Patreon tutorials. It can just have a really difficult pigmentation when it comes to painting on cookies. So ivory is your way to go to build up a brown or any sort of yellowy tone. So this is a gel. What I'm going to do is teardrop my Everclear in here. I always like to work with a bucket that's associated with a color, and then always have a bucket of clean Everclear. I use that to wipe off my brushes, to clean them. You never want to be in a place, because Everclear dries so quickly, you never want to be in a place where you don't have it readily available to quickly smooth something in. So when you're working with gel, what I like to do is I use this empty space over here to work as my palette. I don't put it directly in here unless I'm wanting something super, super, super light, which this one is going to be light, but if you just drag a tiny bit out, that's how you're gonna start to see what kind of color you're really getting. And this is where you'll start to see if you're doing like a warm brown or something like that on in watercolor, you'll see that it starts to show green, and you can even do little dabs on your paper towel and you'll be able to see it there too. So I want to start with just the teeniest, tiniest light bit of ivory. And I'm going to start just filling in these areas. And again, watercolor is all about layering. So once I do that, if I put my hand over the projector, I do this constantly when I am painting something or drawing on something. I'm constantly covering the projector and seeing how I'm doing on my cookie. The other thing to keep in mind with watercolor, you're not looking for it to be exact. That's the art of cookies, right? Is that unless you're doing something that's like a logo or something like that, every piece is its own individual piece of art. So what you're looking for is the essence. You're looking for the essence of, oh, sorry guys, I'm trying to get in by my projector. You're looking for the essence of that art. Okay, so that kind of gave me a rough outline for this. And see, it dries so quickly. For this, I'm using just one of my brushes from Michaels. Obviously, if you're getting brushes from Michaels, you want to make sure that you're only using them for cookies and that no little hands get on them or involved with them. So here is that first flower, okay? And again, we're going to build these up. Get that repositioned on here. About right there. We're going to build these up. So even though this one, you're really not going to see any of that ivory, just to get me going on placement and to get me to a place where I don't need the projector, I'm just going to fill that in really quick. Okay, and we've got another little bit up here. The other thing is, because Everclear dries so quickly, it will dry over here. So you will have to refill them on your palette. Okay, we've got a little bit up here. And then sometimes with gel, it can build up too much on your brush, or you even get these little almost like fibers. Just make sure that you're examining your brush before you put it on your cookie to make sure that those areas aren't getting on here. If you put something on here, let me show you guys a mess up just so you can see. I'm gonna put something on there that's too pigmented for me. Immediately, I'm going to come in and pull Everclear into it. Immediately. And slowly dab it out. See how that lightens it out? See that? Now, Everclear and water, no matter what, it does spread a tiny bit. So you want to be cautious. And again, this is where a lot of that feeling of the essence of the watercolor is what you're looking for comes into play. Okay, so I have a gist of where my flowers are at this point. I'm going to pause on this. I'm going to remember which brush I was using for my pink. So sometimes, or I'm sorry, not my pink, for my ivory. So sometimes what I'll do is I will set it directly next to the gel color that I was using. The worst thing you can do is go and think that you're about to paint something like pink and you actually had used that color or that brush for brown or something like that, because once you do that, you can't go back. Okay, avocado is one of my favorite gel colors to start out with for leaves. I'm just gonna put, a lot of that comes out. There's no way I'm using all of that, but that's okay. Now I'm going to start giving essence of where my greenery is. I'm going to use this, again, the link is in the notes. This is the 3.0 brush. And I'm going to get my Everclear going. And again, I'm just pulling, here, let me move this up for you guys. I'm pulling just a tiny bit of that avocado. And we are working in the lightest amount of liquid and of shade. Again, we're just trying to frame where these things are on our cookie. Remember, this paint spreads with your Everclear. So just be cautious. See how that immediately got so much darker? All right. I am using this super soft, subtle green. See, there's a little fiber. Do you guys see that little fiber that's on there? I'm making sure that I see that and that I'm wiping it away before I go onto my cookie. So again, we are just framing out where all of our pieces of the puzzle are. Here are all of these little dots. I'm going to cover up my projector. All right. Get a frame of reference of where I'm at. I'm going to come down and fill out this leaf. And we've got, make sure I don't have any of those little fibers on my brush. Coming down, slowly filling out my leaves. Let's cover projector. This is the part where it looks very scary. There is a moment in wet on wet, and there's a moment in watercoloring where there's the oh crap moment, and it never, ever, personally, I feel like that never goes away. I always have the oh crap moment until all the final details are done. It's just how it goes. It's a scary part of the process, but you have to trust the process. See, some fibers got on there. I'm gonna bring my Everclear in quickly and try and clear that out. I did not choose the easiest one for us, but lucky for you guys. I feel like greens and super light colors are the hardest to do because to get dimension in watercoloring on a cookie is really difficult. That's why I a lot of times will go back and add black detail lines, which you guys see in my work all the time, those black detail lines, because for some reason, a lot of times when you're painting on a cookie, it just does not translate as sharply. Okay, getting our frame of reference for all of these details. All right, guys, I think that's enough for me. I'm going to turn the projector off, move out of the way for myself. Now what I'm doing, and I will put the little picture up again, I am really just going to reference my artwork. I'm pulling mine over in front of me. All right, so we're back. This is my green. I'm going to set this over by my avocado so I know exactly where it is. Next what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with what I had used for the ivory. I'm looking at my photo now and I'm ready to start adding in my pinks. So what I'm going to add first, we're going to work with the Sugar Art Sweetheart. This is it an Elite? This was before I think they started doing the, what are they? The Super Elites, the ones that are meant for coloring your icings. So this is what's considered a petal dust. One other thing that you can paint with that's not water and not Everclear, and I have not tried it yet, the Sugar Art actually has a solution for painting now. I don't know what is in the solution, and I have not tried it yet, but that is something else for you to try. So comment down below if you have tried that. I would be interested to learn more about it. Okay. A big question that's been asked in our stories was, how do you know how much powder to add and versus whatever your liquid is? I find that the answer to that is it depends on how pigmented you want your color. Because I work in so many layers, I prefer to have it pretty diluted and then slowly build up my color. So I added a pretty good amount, and with these dusts, you really have to stir them in. Stir, 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 because they can get a little grainy if you don't, but they are far more true to color and deeper pigment than your gel colors a lot of time. Okay, so I have my picture right in front of me, and I am going to start adding these pink tones into my flowers. I don't want to over wet my brush. And colors deepen as they dry. So you also do want to take your time and give some space for these colors and move on to the next color, and then come back after your cookie has had some time for that layer to dry. So again, this is the Sweetheart Sugar Art dust. And I'm seeing that it's, as I'm looking at my reference photo, I'm noticing that there's a lot more pink in the middle. So I'm slowly adding some pink. I'm gonna let that one dry, and I'm gonna come over here. If I'm looking at my reference photo, this one has a ton more pink. This one is not our deepest. Our deepest pink is down here. But this one has far, far, far more pink. See how this is deepening already? How it's transitioning more into that pink, but it still has that beautiful kind of ivory peachy undertone that we're wanting. The more that you watercolor, the more you will understand how these colors complement each other, how they can build on one another. This is why I always, always, always have a basket of what I call dummy cookies or misfit cookies. Those are just extra ones that I have. Every now and then I will make an extra just plain white cookie, because if I want to test any sort of painting technique or color combinations, that way I have some cookies to pull from. Okay, this one down here has the deepest pink, and it's a smaller area, so I want less liquid on my brush, because the more liquid you have, the more it's going to spread. I'm ready to start deepening up some of these, so I'm going to add a little bit more. Now look at how much the Everclear is already kind of evaporated from here. I'm adding a bit more. But if it's too much, you can so easily dilute it by just adding more Everclear. Again, you just want to swirl, 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 because you don't want it to be grainy. Because I added more, and I know that this one is the deepest pink, this is where I'm adding it first. I'm just kind of dabbing around first before kind of zhuzhing it around. Zhuzhy, zhuzhy, zhuzhy. Okay, and again, I'm going to come back over here because this is the one that has the most pink. And guys, remember, yes, this is the scary part, but also remember, you are going for the essence of the watercolor. Every single cookie is going to be its individual self, and that is what makes you an artist, and it's what makes the cookies art. Okay, and I'm gonna add more to this middle section of that flower. All right, guys, I am ready to come in with the deepest color. That's gonna be Dusty Rose. Dusty Rose is by far one of my favorite tones and colors. I'm going to add this color right over by where my other pink already is. And I didn't talk about this when we picked up the brush that we had used for ivory and then used it in the gold. It's very similar to mixing all of your icing in the same bowl. What it does is it just kind of blends the colors better. So if you're going to be using, that anyways, it just helps blend the tones. So I put the Dusty Rose over here because I'm going to be pulling in some of these so that everything blends seamlessly. This is the other brush that I had referenced. They're the nail art brushes. And so these and the black ones are just my favorite ones to have on hand for any fine line details. Okay, and see there was a fiber there. Again, I am going to start with where my deepest color flower is, down here. And it's deepest around the edges. So that's really where I'm going to start my focus. I'm even going to come in directly into the gel. See how pigmented that is? And immediately follow up with some Everclear to just blend it in. Swirly, 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 small and controlled. And you're getting that exact essence of what is in our inspiration photo. And again, it's got those deeper lines around the exteriors. Isn't that Dusty Rose just such a beautiful color? I love it. I'm going to add in a little bit more pink into the center. She's got a little bit more of a pinkish tone right in here. And see, the more that Everclear dries over here, the more pigmented that's becoming. All right, I'm gonna pull in a little bit more of this Dusty Rose along the edges. And less swirling, I'm just going to let it kind of fan out how the Everclear naturally spreads out. Okay, I'm gonna leave that be for right now. This one, let's come back to that one. This one is the one that has the next deepest amount of color. And it looks like it's coming into play mostly up in this area. I just love the layering effect. Now guys, you see how long this is taking. This is obviously a very detailed watercolor. I'm taking a lot of time with it because I'm really play-by-play walking through it for you guys, but you can see how these are going to cost more than if you were to, for instance, just stencil airbrush on like a flower detail. So just remember, reference back to our pricing episodes, and just remember to charge your worth, guys. It's so important with these because you can see how long this is taking. They truly are artwork. See how much this one is deepened already? And again, this is where you're going for essence. This is a period where it looks very strange and weird, but this is also where it's okay to take a little bit more of a deeper pigmented color. And while the artwork doesn't show this, on a cookie, sometimes you need to define these segments more because they're not looking at the invitation or things like that. They are looking at a cookie. So out of context sometimes, we need to help define what the thing is. Okay, I'm going to come in here now and do just a little, oh, see, that's really light, or that was really dark. So I'm going to come into my bucket of clear Everclear and see how quickly I can spread that out and fix the quote unquote problem. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna come in with a tiny bit, and I'm just so lightly, this one's so much lighter than this one. And I actually love how light that is. So I'm gonna come back and see if I can lighten up some of these lines by just going over it with some of the Everclear and some of that pink, just to soften it a bit. Okay, I think we're ready to leave that, and let's move on to our green. So we already have our bucket of avocado right here, right? We are going to come back to our 3.0, and avocado has a really beautiful kind of like deep kind of muddy-ish green tone to it. So on some of these, I'm looking at my leaves. So for instance, this one right here, I feel like that one is kind of a pure-ish avocado-y vibe. So I'm gonna come back and deepen this one a bit. I've done this with the flowers too, but if you've noticed, I like to define around the outside and then slowly come in towards the centers of things, because that paints, or because the Everclear kind of helps it spread. It helps to naturally define the outside of these things without having to do a harsh outline. If you kind of start from the outside and slowly work your way in. Okay, so I think this leaf guy over here, and again with leaves, I mean, you can really take a lot of your own interpretation of these. These do not have to be exact to what your inspiration is. Leaves are the most kind of just whatever feels right sort of vibe. Just doing this little stem over here, and I'm gonna make that a little bit more defined by going directly into the avocado and taking the tiniest bit of Everclear. So already defining that one more. That truly had literally barely any avocado. Same thing down here. I'm just helping define the base of this leaf. And then I'm gonna come back with that Everclear and blend it in. All right, I'm gonna work just a tiny bit on these little guys right here. So these are just kind of some little dot things, and these ones have a bit of a brighter green to them, which we're going to come back with and start really defining some of these layers of green colors. But for right now, that's a bit more of those dots. All right, let's see where our next avocado-y looking leaf is. It looks like to me it's going to be this bottom one. And it's a super soft green down here. Noticing that it leaves a little bit of white in the middle. All right, that one's pretty simple and straightforward. Looks like these little dots over here are going to be our next. Now these ones are more intertwined. Again, there's barely anything on this brush right now, but if you just wiggle it around into the cookie, you'll be amazed at how much pigment is actually coming off of the brush. All right, this one over here, it's a little bit more of a moss, but we're gonna go ahead and deepen that a bit. Okay, I think we're ready to start adding in a bit of our fern and rose leaf. I say this even when I'm not painting. I'm gonna go ahead and put these in this little bucket over here. Again, I like to keep my similar colors together because I come back and mix all the time. So I'm gonna mix fern with a tiny bit of rose leaf. So what I was saying before is even if I'm doing piped florals, I feel like one of the things that immediately elevates it is having at least 2 to 3 shades of a green, of your greenery. It just immediately is going to add so much dimension and color, and it just really elevates everything. Now, while I'm mixing this up, I'm going to show you guys what happens to these things when they dry. So this was my paint palette from the sample one that I did. The gels, obviously, those are gonna kind of dry and get all gummied up, and you're gonna have to put out new gel color. But with dust, they just kind of dry into it, and you can rehydrate it with whatever your liquid is. I know plenty of people who work solely with dusts, and they just keep their palettes this way. And they just let it dry up, and then they rehydrate it every single time, so they're not wasting any of the dust. All right, mix, 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 mix. Again, I am still using the same brush that I used for my avocado color. Okay, so see, this one is much more of a muddier kind of green than our avocado. We're just adding in that other dimension of another green. This one actually swoops up under. Let's see, where else do we want a different dimension of color? Up here in these little leafies. Those little guys. And let's see, definitely down here. This one's got more of a deeper, muddier color. Same with this. There's one up here. We're gonna go ahead and paint in. I'm gonna come in and just highlight just even a side of this. Again, you're just adding all of these dimensions. That's what you're doing when you're watercoloring. All right, that's enough for that. I'm gonna come in now and add my electric green. This, I'm gonna be very careful with. I'm gonna add it right over here. That's a big dollop. No way I'm gonna use all that. Again, using the same brush. I'm gonna take a tiny bit of this. See how bright that is? I'm going to cut it with a bit of the avocado. Add a little bit more liquid. Bit more avocado to tone that down. Wipe my brush because I've been using it to mix so much. Definitely in these, they have a brighter tone to them. I'm not going all the way through them, guys. I'm just dabbing and letting that Everclear kind of spread it on out for me. I mean, if you're thinking about how the person painted this, that's pretty much what they did, was they let the water kind of trail out and do that work. It looks like there's another kind of brighter leaf over here. I just love to see it completely transform as you're going. This one down here has got a little bit of a brighter tone. Let's see here. Over here, just towards the edges of these, just dab, dab, dab. Let the water do, the Everclear do the work. Dab, dab. I feel like these almost look like butterflies, don't they? Dab, dab. Okay, I'm gonna do one more area up here. Ooh, that's a deeper tone than I was expecting. So again, wipe off the brush, get your Everclear and kind of tone it out. There we go. Pretty. All right, guys, we are ready. Oh, you know what? There is one area up here that has a super light floral detail. Again, we don't need to be exact with any of this, just taking cues. All right, we're ready for our deepest color, which for this I'm doing an olive for my green. So this is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 greens that I am working with. All just layering up the same brush throughout all of the green. Throughout all of it, I'm taking the tiniest bit, and this is where I'm going to come in and add the true dimension of stuff. There's a branch there. There's a leaf here that goes through to this guy. I'm going to pull in some of this other color to make it not so deep. And we're going to add some of these dimensions up here. We're adding a little bit of tone to the bottom of this leaf. Where else do we need this musty, muddy kind of green color? All right, definitely. We've got a leaf down here that I'm going to start really light on. It's coming out of that. Man, this little area right here is a perfect representation on what adding these dimensions of color can do. Okay, I'm going to add in a tiny bit of avocado to that leaf to green it in a little bit and just blend it with everything. Beautiful. Adding this dimension in. Just adding, adding, adding. All right, there's definitely some very deep tones in this bottom section. There we go. And if you look on the watercolor, there is kind of like a plummy color. I didn't bring that into this. I'm just going to use this mossy kind of color to fill out that kind of dimension of it. Again, it's about that essence. And all I'm doing is just smooshing my paintbrush in and jiggle. Smoosh it in and jiggle. Smoosh it in, jiggle. That's what's giving those little vibes of that little viney situation. There's one that goes in here. We're getting there, guys. It's starting to look more like the inspiration, right? Okay, there is the base of this flower. And it even kind of goes in a little bit to the base here. I'm going to pull a little bit of that olive and a little bit of the avocado. And I'm going to define a little bit of these. Similar to what we did with this flower up here. It just feels like some of this needs a little bit more dimension to kind of pull it out. Defining these a little bit more, using clear Everclear to blend, blend, blend. Oh, she's looking pretty. All right, I think, guys, at this point, I'm just gonna come back and see about blending some of these in a little bit. But I think we're ready to top off our flowers. For that, I am going to come back with this one. This one had our pinks with it. So for this, I'm gonna come up here and I'm using my gold. I'm gonna mix a little bit of the gold in with the ivory. Right up there. I'm pulling the tiniest bit. See, that gold is a little too sharp for me. So mixing in a little bit of ivory. Mixing in ivory with honestly just about any color is going to tone it down a little bit. It gives every pigment kind of more of a muted tonality to it. So you can mix it into like a green to tone it down, a purple to tone it down, really anything. Okay, these we want pretty dang pigmented because they're going to be pretty sharp. And these two, it's just remember you're thinking of the essence. So when I start here, I'm just pushing down and jiggle. Push down and jiggle. And with this, I'm not trying to connect them. I'm just trying to get the initial essence of all of these little seedlings. Push and jiggle. I'm gonna come back and get a little bit more. And the more that I'm pushing and jiggling, the more that they are just naturally going to kind of connect, similar to our inspiration. Push and jiggle. All right, I'm happy with that one. I'm gonna come over to our other one. Push, jiggle, push, jiggle, push, jiggle. Push, jiggle. Just kind of dab, dab, dab to connect them. And again, guys, this is all going to darken a little bit. As we're finishing this up, I just want to make sure that you guys know you want to let these dry under a fan. I'd say at least like 30 minutes or so. Again, that Everclear evaporates really quickly, but definitely let them chill out and dry under a fan. And then you're going to dust them with cornstarch. What that's going to do is prevent it from sticking to a bag of any kind. All right, so here's both of our cookies. Isn't that amazing how, like, yes, they belong in the same set, but every one is going to be a little bit different. And that's the beauty of the watercolor. So thank you guys so much for being here with us. Or, well, I guess with me, with Miss Chelsea in spirit. But tell me what your favorite thing is that you learned. Make sure to share with us and tag us on social media. We are so excited. And yeah, let me know any questions that I can help answer for you guys. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy watercoloring.